Hello everyone, good evening. We are going to do the video classes of for class 12 economics, and we are going to do the chapter called supply, and supply is chapter 5, okay, of your book. We are going to do the chapter supply, and before we go into elaboration, okay, we are to see that where to give due importance. That means in this chapter, what are the important things that are covered. Now, when you go into the chapter, the first thing you have to understand is, what do you understand by supply? Okay, what is supply? And with that, you have to understand what is stock. So we have to understand what is supply and stock, first thing. Second, we have to understand what are the factors affecting supply. Okay, factor affecting supply. Next thing, we have to see or understand what is law of supply. After that, we have to see what are the exception to law of supply. Okay, and finally we have to focus on change in quantity supplied and change in supply. Okay, so these are the 5 important things. Okay, these are the 5 important things that will cover the whole chapter called supply. Now, before I move into the chapter called supply, if you people have understood the demand chapter, this chapter will help you a lot. Okay, because this demand and supply chapters are interrelated. Okay, if you understand demand chapter, undoubtedly you will understand supply chapter. Now, when I taught you demand chapter, I told that you have to consider yourself that you are a consumer. That means you are the consumer of the country. Okay, but when you are into this chapter, that means when you do the chapter called supply, you have to understand, or you have to take yourself into granted that you are a producer, you are a cultivator. Then only you can understand the chapter properly. So just think, okay, you are a producer. Okay, now let us move to the chapter. First is the basic concept of supply. Now, what do you understand by supply? So what do you understand by supply? What do you understand by supply? Now, before you understand what is supply, you have to understand what is stock. Okay, now stock means the total production of a producer. Okay, I am a farmer, I produce 10 kg of rice, that is my stock. Now, out of the 10 kg, I bought 8 kg in the market for selling at a point of time. This is supply. Did you understand? Supply and stock. Stock means the total production. Okay, the total production of the producer. And supply means from that stock, how much is actually bought to the market for selling at a point of time is called supply. Clear? So, stock means total production. Okay, and supply means from that how much is bought to the market for sale. Clear? So you understand supply. So supply is the total quantity of commodity which is actually bought to the market for selling at a point of time. Clear? This is supply. Now come factors affecting supply. That means number 2, factor affecting supply. Now, I told you beforehand that when you read this supply chapter, you have to think that you are a producer. So the first factor that affects supply is price. Now, being a producer, what do you think? If the price of a commodity increases, what will happen to your supply? If price increases, undoubtedly you will increase your supply of thinking that you can earn more. You will earn more and more of profit. Okay, so with price, there is a positive relationship. That means if price increases, supply will undoubtedly increase. So there is a positive relationship between price and supply. Number 1 factor. Come number 2. Number 2 is input price. You understand input price? Input price means cost of raw materials. If I am a producer, if I find that in order to make a commodity, cost of raw materials are increasing, what do you think? What will happen? If input price increases, what will happen to supply? Supply will fall. because in order to buy the raw materials, it will cost me more. Okay, so undoubtedly I'm going to reduce my supply. Clear? So there is a negative relationship between input price and supply. Next, technique of production. If technology is very good, if you have sophisticated technology, what will happen? So if you have improved technology, what will happen? It will increase your supply. You understand? If you have bad technology, outdated technology, backward technology, supply is going to fall. Whereas if you have improved technology, supply will undoubtedly increase. Now, next, government tax. If government tell you that you give me more and more of tax, okay, to the poor farmer, if government tell to increase tax, what will the producer do? Okay, so if government increases tax, what will happen to supply? Supply will fall. Clear? Next factor, population. If population is high, what will happen? Supply also will be high. Clear? Next, natural calamities. Natural calamities like earthquake, like flood. Okay, if such thing happen, what will happen? If there is natural calamities like earthquake, like flood take place, normally supply will be affected, right? So if natural calamity take place, supply is going to fall. So these are the factors that affect supply. Okay, clear? So I gave you only 6 factor, elaboration of 6 factor, but there are many more. Okay, so for now you understand that there are 6 type of factor that affect supply: price, input price, price of the commodity, input price, technique of production, government tax, population, natural calamities. There are many more. Okay, there are some factor like goal of a firm. So that details will move afterward, but for present time you understand that with price there is a positive relation. If price is high, supply also is high. With input price there is a negative relation. If input price, that means price of raw material, if it increases, supply will fall. If technique of production is very improved, undoubtedly supply will increase. If government tell you to pay more and more of tax, supply is going to fall. If population increase, supply is going to increase. And if any natural calamities take place, supply will fall. Clear? So these are the factors that affects supply. Next, come to law of supply. That is, this is the 3rd part of the chapter. Okay, law of supply. What does law of supply tell? Now, before I start the chapter only, I told that you have to think you are a producer. Now, you people tell me, if price increases, here only I talk about this. That means if price increases, if you are a producer, what will you do? You will increase your supply. That means what a relationship they have a positive relationship. This is law of supply. But there is a thing. That means when you study this law of supply, you have to consider that except this, all these factors are constant. Okay, if other factors are constant, there is a positive relationship between supply and price. Okay, keep in mind, you have to use this word called other factor remaining constant, and this is called ceteris paribus, Latin word. Okay, so other factor remaining constant, there is a positive relationship between price and supply. If price increases, supply also increases. If price fall, supply also falls. Look here, look into the diagram. In this axis we are measuring price, in this axis we are measuring quantity supplied. Positive means like this. Okay, look, this is my original price, P0, original quantity. Look, if price increases, price is increasing to P1, automatically quantity supplied also increases to Q1. That means if supply increases, quantity supply also increases. And if price fall, look here, if price move to P2, falling, so ultimately quantity supplied is also falling, moving towards 0. Okay, so this is law of supply, a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. Clear? Understood law of supply? So law of supply tells that there is a other factor remaining constant. There is a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. Clear? This part understood? Now here you have to know, you have to understand three important definition, okay? You have to understand three important definition. The first important definition is, what do you understand by supply function? Okay? What do you understand by supply curve? And what do you understand by supply schedule? So these three parts you have to understand very properly. First, what is supply function? Now you know that there are various factors that affect supply, right? Now the relationship between supply and factor affecting supply is called supply function. That means supply, okay, quantity supplied is a function of, quantity supplied is a function of what? Price, own price, input price, technique of production, government tax, population. So the relationship between quantity supplied and the factor that affects supply is called supply function. Clear? Come to supply curve. What is supply curve? Curve is what? Curve is nothing but a graphical presentation, okay? So supply curve is nothing but a graphical presentation, okay? Graphical presentation showing the relationship between, what? Between price and quantity supplied, okay? Whenever we show the relation between price and quantity supplied, if we show this in a graphical way, like in a curve, that is called supply curve. So supply curve is a graphical presentation showing relationship between price and quantity supplied. Whereas schedule, how do you give your schedule? How do you give your schedule? Schedule is always tabular. So same thing, it is a graphical presentation, whereas supply schedule is a tabular presentation. So it's a tabular presentation. But keep in mind, both of them shows the same relationship. That means relationship between price and quantity supplied. So supply curve is a graphical way, whereas supply schedule is a tabular way. But both of them show same thing, relationship between price and quantity supplied. Clear? Clear this much?